and I hope that it's going to be fine.
I'm very sure. Don't worry. I hope you don't regret everything that is going to happen in the future. No, that wouldn't be very good. But yeah. So I'm not sure. Now we
maybe you introduce yourself.
Yeah.
That might be easier than if I try.
Just very easy. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Sandra Bartoli. And I teach at the University of Applied Sciences, so Hochschule München, in the Architektur faculty. And my office is the Büros for Konstruktivismus in Berlin, and we deal with architecture, a lot of projects that deal with the existing structures, but also we do research and we do also exhibitions. And so we like to sort of navigate in many different directions just because, we like that. I think it's enriching, and it's at least in our life, if not professionally, but I think we still believe the architects are generalists, and therefore they can look at things in many different ways. So thank you for having me. Yeah, that's quite an honor. The TU Munich, and so far today there is like an input sort of lecture or talk for 45 minutes, and then there is going to be a discussion with Ferdinand, Ludwig. That's and everybody else. I don't know, Antonius, and I don't know. We're three so far. Okay. I understand that this thing is also live on YouTube, or how do you? Okay, good. So I can. I don't know. Anybody wants to say something else? Otherwise, I would just.
Yeah, maybe a short introduction of Ludwig, or we could also do this in the discussion panel. And maybe one more thing, we announced Andres Lepig for the talk today, but he also is sick today and can't take part. So we're going to do it, the three of us. And I'd say we drop right into your lecture.
Okay.
And thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. That's and you asked me first of all because of my participation to the German pavilion, and Ferdinand Ludwig also did a contribution for the pavilion. Really beautiful, really great interview, really inspiring, and so I start with that, and then I start also sharing some slides. So that's. I need to be enabled sharing.
Now it should work.
Okay. So, oops, no, not yet. Okay, now.
Now it should work.
Right. Okay, thanks. I have to find it. Oops. I'm in the wrong, okay, sorry, I'm in the wrong order. Okay, well, we start with this. Well, you asked me because of the quite interesting German pavilion, which is called 2038. And if you go to the pavilion, there is nothing to see, but actually everything is there. It's just that it's online, and it's practically reports from the future of 2038. Of different people, from different disciplines, who are explaining how things worked out in the future. In the next, I don't know. That's it's not so far away, 2038, and the pavilion is sort of conceived. At least this is how I understand it. Also talking to the curators. As trying to sort of go back to the essence of planning in architecture, and then you operate in a way so that you always conceive a project that is not there yet, doesn't exist, but it will exist in the future. You're going to change the present, you're going to change the future, therefore, with your work. So it's really part of projection, speculation is really part of the work of an architect. And it's also the concept for the pavilion, as far as I understand, in 2038, is that it comes from a stifling perspective of the present, where there is an accumulation of systemic problems that are kind of leading to a general collapse. So there is kind of the moment of saying, no, we can solve things, and we can even solve it from the discipline of architecture. Let's empower architecture with this drive towards the future. We're bringing solutions from the future. So the reports we see, they actually come from the perspective of this future. And in this future through 2038, everything is solved. All the problems are gone pretty much. It's not all perfect, but 80% is perfect. And it's throughout all kind of things, it's through a collaboration of all organisms, through an advancement, a very fast advancement in technology, and artificial intelligence, and it's a feedback loop of information informing then the way we plan, the way we take responsibility for the planet, because at this point you probably the notion of the Anthropocene, that we practically humans are affecting the planet geologically. I mean, there is no more Holocene, we are in the Anthropocene. So therefore, by affecting this, we have even a higher degree of responsibility. It's really because we are destroying this planet practically. So that's the message. So this is really it's very exciting what they did. And I think the stream of interviews they did, and the amount of proposals is the density of the proposals, and they're all concrete, they're all real in a way, they're all possible, is what makes it really exciting and empowering also. But here I was asked for two reasons to contribute to this project, because I also, together with Sylvan Linden and Martin Conrads and other two people, we worked already with a project that was about taking news from the future into our present. And we did this a long time ago. That was in 2007, 2006, actually, that we proposed a project to the Bundeskulturstiftung. It got funded to do a publication, a magazine dated in the future, but it was actually would be pre-released from the future. And we had 3 different dates. Here we see the cover of 2048. And we had 3 different dates with 3 different scenarios. So for us, it wasn't really about saying, okay, everything is solved. For us, it was more important the possibility that we can imagine a future, because back then it was the W. Bush era, Iraq War, the early 2000 years. There were there was a moment of stasis and stillness in a way, in the sense of the availability of an imagination of a future wasn't there. So we said, let's do this and let's push people to imagine this future. We have 3 different short scenarios, and we ask people to contribute from that perspective, from the perspective of the future. So the magazine would come into the present as a pre-release. And just to give you just a short thing, so we had 2006, so therefore 5 years into the future, 2011, which is 25 years after Chernobyl. So this is just to give you the summary of the scenario we imagined for that moment. So it would be very trendy, ridiculous, short-lived, probably catastrophic, hyper-future, sleek, shiny. This is maybe in a more traditional way we think about the future. Then we had 2036, which was more unofficial, so resistance. So the magazine would come out from the underground as a movement of resistance, and of fighting back a certain state of things in the world. So it was an amount of heroism involved, an amount of romanticism, illegal knowledge played a role, and also pain, and so on. So, and one of the tools was restriction, in terms of writing. And the last one is 2048, which is kind of exciting because it's still far away, but not so far away. I might still be alive at that moment. And it's 200 years anniversary of the Communist Manifesto. So that's also important. And it's so the magazine was the envisioning or the imagination for the magazine was that it was set up in a situation that was institutional, it was official, it wasn't anymore underground, and the entire world would be completely governed by a sort of like a state terrorist vision, completely controlled and ultimately planned. There would be somehow a supernatural sense of organization among all organisms, breathing cities, organic matter, alive materials, all that kind of things. So that was, but also simultaneously an idea of ignorance and oppression and paradise that is imposed, an imposed paradise. And the tool that we used was exaggeration. And then we asked 60 different authors to participate, and from very different disciplines, somehow similar to what happened also for the pavilion in Venice, because they also asked, they were really interested in very, very different disciplines. Not, but there are quite an amount of architects, but it's also spread out. I just give you just because I think the concept is kind of interesting, just to how you structure the idea of a future, and I think that's maybe the most interesting thing about this. And then so we had always three main categories that we thought would be immortal and would always last and never end, like life, death, and sex. And you can also call them construction, destruction, and desire. And then we sort of conceived different kind of tools, rhetorical tools that we would propose to the authors. And then all the authors would come, yeah, as I said, that would be scientists, journalists, geographers, architects, of course. But yeah, it would be very spread out. But yeah, we thought that some tools would be interesting for them, like, and we stole them also a little bit from the cyberpunk movement in science fiction. Like retrofitting. Retrofitting is the opposite of the shiny future that was imagined in the 50s. Flying cars, everything shiny, everything stainless steel. The people would look always the same and very beautiful, trained and fit, and so like somehow a kind of a fascist projection of a future. Retrofit is quite the opposite. It takes everything that is there, and then you juxtapose layers of future on it, which means that whatever resources are there in terms of built material or built environment will be still there. You just add things to that in order to make it work in the future. I mean, all our cities are more or less like that. New York City is very much like that because it's a modern city that sits on an infrastructure that was built in the 19th century. And if you look, I don't know, and a famous example is Blade Runner. Ridley Scott, the first one, and also the second one. I would say Blade Runner is also very much based on retrofitting. And then we looked at another tool, which is mirror time. We always stand in the present, and then we have the past in the back and the future in the front. But the more we look into the past, the more estranged it becomes, more stranger and distant from us, that we could also imagine that the past, the further past, could be also somehow some form of future. So it could be also reversed. I don't know if you know, I don't know, steampunk as an example. It's also a genre in science fiction that works with the Industrial Revolution moments, and it takes it as a science fiction story. That's very interesting because then you look at history in a very different way, because everything in history becomes something that can become a tool to approach a future or to work that we can experiment with in our present, to think. And that this is something that we still work on in our work of research. Then there is a slipstream attitude, which is Rückenwind, and it's also stolen from the cyberpunk, and it's a manifesto. There is a manifesto for the cyberpunk movement. That when you look at reality as a raw matter that doesn't necessarily is logic, is not rational. There is no rationale in it. And you increase that logic, and then therefore you create scenarios that are really strange and odd. And I mean, reality is odd. Don't we know that? But it's useful to take it in. And then I just show you just a few images. I mean, the thing is about when you take a projection from the future, or you take even news from the future, they might not age well. So some things work and still work from the magazines with it. Some things don't work as well. I just show you what I think it's fascinating. This is a research by a geographer about the Volga Deutsch, the Volga Germans, who moved from Russia to Argentina in the mid 19th century. And this geographer went there many years and took the photographs of the same people in their own domestic environment. And this is two brothers, and we see it well in the 90s. But then we see another image from the 60s when he took the first pictures of them. And somehow it's strange and somehow sad. Also, environment very poor. And the tools that they have in the background, they're becoming less the further away the years go by. I mean, here, the tools are disappearing in the back from the kitchen. But yeah, there is a certain intensity in it and a certain grit in these images that somehow still work in a sense of a news from a strange future in Argentina, perhaps. And then just a short example about time capsules. You probably know the notion of time capsule when you take something from your present objects or news, and you just put them in a bag and you dig them in the ground and you leave them there for 50 years and then you take them out. And the way you read these artifacts in 50 years is going to be very different. And you're going to have a very different idea of that time 50 years before. And also it's like news also from a strange past. And in this case, it's a survey of a strip of Amazon forest from Manaus, I think, to Santa Cruz. And it was done in 2006. It's from Google Earth. I think it's not possible anymore now. But you see how the forest was being eroded and cut down, and the felling was brutal. And I think if you look at it now, it's even worse. So that's this is something that we wanted to put inside the magazine in order to verify eventually whenever we were going to face again the release of the magazine. And I now show you another project that came out then 2 years later after our own publication in 2008. That's also has a lot of similarities, perhaps, to 2038, the pavilion in Venice, the German pavilion. And that's the New York Times that was released by Yes Men 1 day after the election of Obama as a United States president. And this is a fake. No, it was also supported by the New York Times. Obviously, many of the journalists contributed to this, and it was a speculation of what achievement Obama would make in 4 years, and it would be how the Iraq War would end. So it was like a also self-fulfilling prophecy somehow, wishful. Prophecy for making things better, to really move things in a better direction. So all these news are fake, obviously, and they're all positive. They're all great. I don't know, Guantanamo prison is closed, and all kind of, I don't know, that's all kind of taxes, equal taxes, taxing the rich, etc., etc. These all kind of things. It's very interesting in this magazine. They think they printed 2 million copies, and they were just given away for free in the subway. And so this is to talk about concepts of future also within the realm of architecture. And now I move specifically to the contribution I made for the German pavilion then. And it deals with the contribution is a short interview. Yes, short interview, but it's also a speculative part, and it deals with two researches. One is an exhibition project, but also a book project, which is Licht durch Scheiße, Archaeologies of Sustainability, which is an environmental history of architecture, which doesn't exist in reality, but we try to do it with this exhibition, with this book, to collect this idea of a history of architecture within ecology, within environmental movement, and to retrace a new past that would help us in our present. So that's one of them. And the second one is the Tiergarten Landscape of Transgression. That's an earlier research of mine in Tiergarten in Berlin, the oldest park within the city. And I'm going to start a little bit to talk about Tiergarten, and I move to Lichtluftscheiße, but it will be seamless, the connection. So Tiergarten, in terms of, for me, I mean, the focus of the research is really the relationship between the city and nature, and also finding new paradigms or finding new terms that allow us to dissolve the dualism or the division between city and countryside, between human constructed environment and nature, and try to find new terms and new ways of looking at things, and looking at models that have carried the promise of a city that is for all organisms and not only for humans. And I think Tiergarten for me was really helpful. You think, okay, it's a park, it's natural. Yes, and at the same time, it's not. So I use the term transgression for Tiergarten because it's a place that contains aspects of ecology, of urbanism, of heritage, of daily culture, politics. But at the same time, all these categories are visibly transgressed. It's in the middle of the city, it's in the core of the city, and it carries the history of the city itself. And in the same time, it presents it in a very different way, because natural history here is combined with human history, and it's one thing. And I show you just one picture of an unruly forest, which is often Tiergarten. It's quite messy. This is one of the first maps. It's the first one, I think, yeah. We have of Tiergarten. It was an original forest. It was a swampish forest along the Spree, along the glacial valley of Berlin. I don't know if that's, you see here the Spree, the river. Here you have the core of the ancient city with the castle on this side, and Unter den Linden on this side, and you have also Brandenburger Tor on this side. And this is the original forest was just fenced in for a royal hunting ground, like many other parks in Europe. But this is the specificity of this is that it is an original forest. And then the planners started to carve in the roads, take out the trees to make roads to go through from Berlin to Charlottenburg, or also in the Baroque time, more of the plans were carved out to make rooms, to make spaces, and the fence was taken away, so it became a public park and so on. But I'm not going to go through the history of it, it would be too long. I show you just an image of a painter. The painter is Daniel Chodowiecki. And this is called Gesellschaft in Tiergarten. It's kind of beautiful because it still works. It's still the way people understand this place. And you see these people with their beautiful clothes, and they're sitting on the ground. They're really enjoying the nature, and they're so leisurely sitting there pleasurefully and within this space. And it's a place of lust and pleasure. Yeah, and it still is. It very much holds this promise. And there is no, they're not afraid of dirt, obviously, these people. But Tiergarten was destroyed, was completely felled. All the trees were gone almost. And this happened not during the war, it happened right after the war in 1946 and 1947 because of the cold winters. The British Army allowed the citizens in Berlin to fell 200,000 trees, and of which only 700 were left. And of the ancient trees that we still see, maybe 100 now, you can find within the park. So it was really like a moment of a zero history, in a moment zero in history, the starting point again for the city and for Tiergarten. This is just the way it was used afterwards. It was also used for farming, but meaning there are many anecdotes and many moments that the farming wasn't idyllic. It was kind of existential. Of course, people were living in these gardens in order to protect their produce. And then there was almost immediately in the 50s, there were replantation, also because there were severe sandstorms that were hitting the city, and the entire area of Tiergarten is all sand. So there was just, it was, from the point of view of the climate, it was also necessary to replant this forest. The replantation was done by Willy Alverdes, and he's an interesting garden director because his idea was to create a park that could host people as well as animals and wild plants. And he did it by using the models of the plant societies, which was at that point an ongoing study, so that the plants live in communities, live in societies, and they're kind of sustainable in themselves. They sustain each other, a certain kind of plants, and the variety of plants goes from the level of the grass to the bush to the tree. And they create also certain special spatial conditions. So he took 6 specific plant societies from the Brandenburg region. Well, 2 of them were not from the Brandenburg region because he wanted to allow for variety, and planted Tiergarten accordingly. So there would be, so there is a certain density in that, therefore. It's not just the lawn, the meadow, and the tree. It's way more articulate. What he did also, I'm just showing you just a small part. This is a rhododendron grove, rhododendron hain, and this is the stream, the waterways that go through Tiergarten. They were built back in by Linné, but they were reestablished. And then you have the large paths, large trails here for people, for bikers, and so on. And then you have a very thin trail here. And it's just 50 centimeters in the width. So which means that only one person can go through. You cannot have 2 people close to each other walking by, because he wanted to have this area more protected and more silence in a way, so that the animals could linger here. They wouldn't be afraid to stay here. And maybe perhaps more wilderness would grow here, would be allowed, would be encouraged. And that's the way he thought about it. So this is really this lush, strange forest with many characteristics from natural forests. That was his idea, and kind of special. This is a picture from the rhododendron hain, very lush, very full and rich. So you see, it's not transparent. It's everything is sort of hidden away and mysterious. And yeah, I come to perhaps the 2 or actually 4 aspects of transgression that really make Tiergarten really special. So the transgression of heritage, because if you think about the destruction after the war, then Tiergarten is brand new. So it is a protected park. In the same time, it's completely new. The trees are only maybe 60, 70 years old. But for these reasons, so many different histories can be projected within this place. And maybe this is the potential of Tiergarten, and this is a transgression that it allows in heritage. Then we have transgression of ecology. This is Bobby, the first gorilla that was brought to the zoo. The zoo in Berlin is adjacent to Tiergarten. It's actually part of Tiergarten. But because I want to talk about the animals, because it's Tiergarten, it's really interesting. It raises a challenge of a very high biodiversity, which was proven through different kind of documentations that were done in 2006, 2011, and so on and so forth. There is a huge variety of plants and animals living in this place, so way more than in Central Park or Hyde Park. But then the transgression of ecology is that it's also hosting also mass events, this place. It's also hosting a very intense hues. And how do you, how is it possible that this is this combination of high biodiversity and also a high level of city, in a way, of urbanity happening in this place? So in a way, it projects an expanded notion of ecology, Tiergarten. And then there is the transgression of urbanism. And in a way, Tiergarten is one of the most public places in Berlin, where the true nature of public life is possible in terms of coexistence of different layers of societies, coexistence of different animals, coexistence of different ways of life, or coexistence of different desires also. I mean, we have here 100 years gay cruising, and that coexist with a naturist meadow, where it's called the Fleischwiese. And then and you have all kind of ways of interpreting this place. And it's exactly the interpretation that is open, because it's not zoned. It's all based on contingencies, on interpretation. But it's not an empty space, a terrain vague. It's highly structured, and it's structured through the planned societies. It's structured through plans, through the spatiality that the plans can create within their structure. So that's what I want to bring to you as an example. I think the most important thing is not that there is a jogger nudist here running by, but because it's also hosting the falcon, the hawk, the night owl, the badger, and the beaver, and all kind of very precious plants of the red list that can grow here. So that's really, it's city, and it's in time, it's a high level of nature. And then we go to transgressive humanism. So we go to the post-human. So the next step, the next level, hopefully for a future that is different than a human-centric perspective, that is a multiple organism perspective. And I show you a tree that has been, I don't know, devastated by the war, I don't know, hit by bombs, who knows? And it's a strange individual, it's a strange creature. And this is what Tiergarten suggests. It is a strange place. It's large, it's incommensurable. It's 210 hectares. It's difficult to navigate. It's difficult to get an orientation within it. And at the same time, it promises so many different worlds within it, worlds of nature and worlds of humans, but maybe we don't need this division anymore. And now I step to the next, this is, I'm stepping a little bit, I'm going towards the Lichtluftscheiße, Archaeology of Sustainability project. And I show you the Biotope Map, because the Biotope Map, the first Biotope Map, first of all, that was done in the world. And it was made for West Berlin. And you see here West Berlin, it's the color part, and the black line you see on the edges is the wall. So you have a city that is contained by the wall, and so therefore the perspective is completely changed for the people living in it. All the open areas, all the even the fallow land, the Brache, are precious areas. Even the destroyed areas that are open and empty are precious, and because there is no way to go out, so everything is there as a strange anomaly. The empty space that is available to the people. And this pushed, well, this certainly excited the experience for the citizens of the space, the open space within the city, but also the botanists and all the scientists started to look inward within the city and looking at the plants that were growing there. Because the city was mostly destroyed after the war. So there was rubble, and there was destruction everywhere. But within 10 years, it was covered with strange weeds, with strange plants that were rising to the surface. And this manifestation of this very special city that is a tragic in a way, close inside the wall, but it manifested a very different understanding of the city that moved to within the system of politics and the system of science to create this document. And the document is much larger than just a map. It's a book, and it's an instruction, it's guidelines, and it's many different maps. But it's an understanding of a city as a natural space. It's a city that is it's a series of biotopes of different value, of course. But this is really the moment, and they started this in the 60s, and it was published in the 80s. I show you just a few images that this is not Berlin, this is London, but it's the same kind of, there is a parallel story. There is also kind of a movement that looks at the city, the destruction of the city as a new potential of a new understanding of city in combination with nature. And again, it's looking at the destroyed areas near St. Paul's Church, and looking at the weeds that are growing out of this, the strange plants that come out from the rubble. And this is a picture from Berlin, very typical. So a block destroyed, you have the rubble there, but you still can also see little gardens happening there. And you see the strange plants that are growing out of the destruction. And you must know that when the seeds of plants are dug in deep into the earth when the city is built, and seeds can last for centuries. And once they're brought up to the surface because of bombing, because of destruction, they can germinate. Therefore, the kind of plants they were found here were really special. They were some of them were really ancient, and they didn't exist in the city before. They were never seen in the city before. And so there is a very exotic kind of nature that started growing here. Just an idea of this. This comes from the same book about London, but just showing you the amount of nature that it was encouraged, therefore, by these new forms of ruins happening within the city. And again, from the same book. The starting point for this work of the Biotope Map, so the birth of urban ecology in West Berlin, that was the work by Wolfram König, a plant biologist and actually a landscape planner who was working at the TU, and he did his PhD on West Berlin, and he laid out the groundwork for the Biotope Map. He analyzed West Berlin based on the existence of plants, and depending on the variety of plants, then he divided the city in 4 areas. And these coincided, of course, with the more dense areas. Certain kind of plants can grow within dense areas. Some other kind of plants are growing in more rarefied areas, less built areas. But nothing was excluded. Also, the buildings were included in this analysis. And we have here, I don't know, you can read on this side, ein Einteilung des Stadtgebietes in so eine ähnliche floristische Zusammensetzung. Yeah. So you have the geschlossene Bebauung, the aufgelockerte Bebauung, the innere Stadtraum, the äußere Stadtraum, and so on. So these are just a brief introduction to his work in his PhD. And then we look at one specific area that he analyzed and documented. It was a botanical survey. And this is the Potsdamer Bahnhof, the station in Potsdamer Platz that was destroyed. And Potsdamer Bahnhof was in a strange jurisdictional situation because it belonged to the east while standing in the west. So it was somehow no man's land, and therefore they fenced it in, and nobody was allowed to go inside for 20 years until it was exchanged with other areas from the east, and therefore it became part of the west. But for a long time, it was a completely constructed area that was destroyed, therefore, and then plants and animals started living inside it and started growing in it. And König analyzed, this is some images from him, we received from him from his archive of this area, and he shows, he uses also words that come from urban planning, maybe the Besiedlung der Moose, or the settlements of mosses and lichens on the steps of the destroyed station. And he, with his language, he describes this strange new nature growing on top of the human constructed environment. And it's fascinating, and it's beautiful, and it's rich, and it's promising. And so there is this connection to decay, and an acceptance of decay, an acceptance of the ruin, or embracing of the ruin in itself. And I think it's extraordinary. What I wanted to say also that these, we saw the maps of the Biotope Map, and well, we can keep going. Yeah, this is like a fragment from the Biotope Map, and we see here Tiergarten. That was the first time that, one of the first times that botanists started using tools from urban planning, because they were not botanists, they were ecologists and biologists, of course, plant biologists, but because they thought they needed to convince, in political terms, to convince a city that there is going to be a different direction for the development of the city. So it's not just a documentation, it is a plan of action, it is a project. And therefore they started looking into urban planning, what kind of tools are used in there, how, and this was very much supported by the Senate in Berlin, and this work was published by the Senate itself. So it became really a Maßnahmenprogramm, it became a program of development for the city. It wasn't just trying to save whatever biotopes that are more valuable. It was about increasing the value of the biotopes within the city. And the categories for the guidelines that we're proposing, it's 600 pages of guidelines. They were radical, and they're described in the most dry way. But if you look into them, it's about embracing an aesthetic of decay, an aesthetic of rot, of living together with the organism, as filthy as they are, just accepting them. I don't know, for the high-rise buildings, an example, they were proposing that would be spaces that were not heated within the buildings, they were allowed for animals to live within. Mice, birds, spiders, insects, whatever you have it. So that's something really that I think in terms of mirror time, this is a project that really is so promising for the future. This is something that we could just take it and implement it and at the full, and then see what happens. And I think it has so much potential. Just another image. This is again from London, but again, it's the same set of same direction in the approach, but it's a different kind of work. It wasn't a map, it was a photographic work, it was a text work. And looking at the spiders, looking at the insects living within the houses as part of this strange nature that is the city. I hope I'm still within the time, I'm almost done. But I wanted to bring you maybe a more architectural project that we also dealt with, and we presented also in the project of Lichtluftscheiße. That's Ott Hoffmann's Baumhaus in Darmstadt. You might know it. It's a beautiful project that was built in the 70s by Ott Hoffmann, an architect. That was his own project. It was somehow a semi-autarkic house that was conceived as a structure that could hold and support and you call them, I would say, support trees and animals, of course, as a default, but mostly plants and trees. And so it's a very experimental building, because it's one of the first impermeable concrete structures we have in Germany. And it's also, it was planned without sealant. So there was, the combination also with plants was kind of very experimental, and he had to sort of amend a lot of the problems that he encountered, that Ott Hoffmann encountered, by establishing the terracing and establishing all the planting. And when the roots started to go through the building, then he had to sort of counteract it. Therefore, it's really a test bed, this building, and it's incredible. He also used rain and gray water to water the plants supported by the structure itself for the irrigation. There is a solar collector on top, and there is also a windmill generating electricity. And he had to fight many years with the administration of the city to get permission to build that. So it was he was like a I don't know, fighting against windmills practically in his project. The way he did it, it was absolutely low tech. Also, the gathering of the rainwater, the reuse of gray water. Absolutely, you see the stepping elements taking down, the rain, sort of letting it flow throughout all the terraces. And there is a certain roughness and a certain special kind of aesthetics in this building. Slightly, brutalist if you want, but it's also, and it's lush and it's green and it's strange and it's like a strange green monster within the city. And now it's been also listed recently, so that's quite an achievement. Here we see this building is it's not housing, it's for offices and Gewerbe, they call this commercial building. But in this case, we see the floor where Otto Hoffmann lived and also worked, that's his office. It's also, there is some specificities about the generosity of the space. Also the space is, the ceiling is 4 meters high than within the space, so that all the furniture can be lifted up and the space can be left empty. All the furniture were designed by Otto Hoffmann, and there were kind of strange capsules that you could fold in and put away or lift up. There is a gallery on top, on the highest part with the library, and there is a strong relationship with the plants. The plants are there to protect the inner environment. Also, they are filters to the light, to the heat, and they're also set strategically depending on the direction of the north, south, east, west. And I show you just a couple of pictures. This is the greenhouse, so it's very hot and it brings heat and it heats up the place in the winter. And here we see the bed that can be lifted up. You see also a little bit Otto Hoffmann lying down inside this space, and of course everything outside is there to control the climatic situation within the space. So plants are kind of like coexisting and collaborating in this sort of coexistence, establishing comfort also for the environment inside the house, and at the same time they receive their own comfort from the building itself. Just an example of this Raumzelle that he developed. So it's kind of simple and Spartan, but in the same time, he's always been very consistent in the way he approached resources. He's always been careful about resources and within the house in itself and within the space in itself. A sketch from Otto Hoffmann, and I show you. It's one of the last things I show you. Das ist der Raum für unser Haus. It's a sketch he did for his children to show how much land was being taken away from the natural environment in order to build this building. And this was a message to say that if we take this away from the ground, from the organism, from the nature, we need to give something back. And that's a message in this sketch. And then I bring you another example, because we have many different historical examples, but they're so wild, they're so almost science fiction. It's the book by Charles Darwin, one of the last books he did about about worms and the action of worms in the ground and the activities of worm in the ground. And this is a drawing of a worm casting I'm not sure, ein turmartige Exkrementhaufen, exactly. Because worms, as these little creatures, keep reworking the ground. They keep churning it and reworking it and making it, soft. They create the humus, they create the top soil, and they constantly change the crust, the thin crust of the planet. They constantly work on it. And Darwin has been observing these animals for 15 years. He also went to Stonehenge to look at these great stones that were kind of sinking into the ground. And there is this chapter in this book that is called The Sinking of Great Stones. And he makes a discovery. He observes this area because archaeologists are working there. So he's able also to look at the worms and the work within this area. But he observes that the juridical monument of Stonehenge are sinking not because of their weight, but because of the work of the worms around it or within the ground, and they're casting. They're constantly reprocessing the earth and throwing it out and making to a cycle. This is just a drawing to show the work of the worms. Of course, the topsoil is free from all kind of heavy stones. These heavy stones are pushed into the bottom, and that's a process that is continuous, and therefore it's also the same process is the condition of the stones in Stonehenge, and that are sinking in because of the work of this little animal. And therefore, the great stones built by humans are undermined by worms. And this is a quote from Charles Darwin. And this is just to give you, it's a change in perspective. As I said, from an anthropocentric point of view, we look at the world from many different perspectives, also the perspectives of an animal that might seem superfluous, not unimportant, but it's actually key to the health of the soil and on the planet. And I think with this, I will finish, hopefully not too long presentation. And I stop sharing, and thank you for listening. Yeah, it's good. It's okay.
Thank you very much. I personally really enjoyed it. And so let's bring in Ferdinand Ludwig, who is professor of the chair of, let me not get it wrong, Green Technologies and Landscape Architecture at TUM. And I believe, first of all, I'd be very interested to hear what you took away from Sandra's lecture. As on one hand, you were a contributor of the German Pavilion as well. We showed you your film at the 333 Pavilion in Munich as well today. And on the other hand, you work with and you study and you teach green technologies, and it is something you Sandra said earlier, that natural history and human history is one thing, and it always will be. And right now, I believe we're going apart from it. And a big part of your lecture was just about exactly this part of growing back together in a way. And yeah, what do you think about this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Antonius, and also for the kind invitation. It's great speaking and discussing here with Sandra, because I really very much enjoyed your lecture. I think we are kind of relatives in mind. We also have a similar background, being in between architecture and landscape architecture, which helps, I think, very much for understanding time, understanding long time scales, not just 1 year, but decades and centuries. This is a very important aspect. Yeah, but coming back to your question of how my experience were with the Architecture Biennial, especially with the curatorial team of the German Pavilion, this was a really impressive thing I have worked out and experienced there. Yeah, as Sandra said, if you go there, it's empty and it's a bit of spooky, yeah, because everybody is inside with watching things on the smartphone, because you only have these QR codes at the wall and you photograph this QR code and you get the same video as at home, which is a bit, looks a bit dystopian in a way, and stands in a huge contrast to the highly optimistic worldview that this pavilion wants to share. And I think this is very, very important also as a message as for architecture and landscape students, because we are so much used to the bad news daily, or we have this destruction of the planet, and we are trained to do architecture, to design with a kind of a bad attitude. We always destroy nature by building, and we consume things, and then we might have created a masterpiece, but we always have caused destruction of the planet. And if we are good, we are less bad. This is what we are trained, and we get a DGNB gold bomb hero thing, and then we are have made a lot of isolation around our house, so energy use is minimal, but still we have this, oh my God, we did something not so good to the environment. And the German pavilion, and also what you were saying today, Sandra, is exactly the opposite, is exactly the way that we have, that we overcome this separation of here humans and society and culture and their nature, and we have to kind of balance it out or something like this. The German pavilions really looks back, and this is great. And by this looking back, and also what you presented with your magazine, Sandra, is you can in your mind you can do much larger steps if you look back than if you look forward, because when you look forward, you always have these little obstacles, and you, after the 5th or 10th obstacle, you give up. And if you just jump, you can look back over 100 obstacles in your way. It doesn't matter so much. And this is really a cool trick. And I have adapted that for teaching. So for example, my I think it's a 2nd semester landscape architecture lecture. At the end, I hate exams. I don't make exams. Yeah, I think all that are studying with me know that. I ask just the students to write 2 sentences, what they will have contributed to the world by being a landscape architect when they look back on their work on 2038. So I do exactly the same thing, and suddenly there is a vision behind everybody. And this is really great. And we, and I speak more for landscape architects than for architects here, because when we, in landscape architecture, when we plant a tree, we are visionaries. Because if we would not believe in a future that there are good growing conditions in 50 or in 100 years, and Sandra said, the plants, the trees in the Tiergarten are young because they are just 70 years old. Yeah, so look into the future 70 years. Yeah, this is far beyond 2038, and the trees are still young. So every time we make this little circle on the plan where a tree could stand, this is a vision, and this is an optimistic statement, and this is just great. And I think in architecture it's quite singular, but we more creative. At least architecture still tries to create finalized objects, which I think is wrong. It's always just a moment in time, but we are still this same way of optimism that is necessary, and that is really in this great work of Ott Hoffmann. Is also one of my favorites, Sandra. I show in my lectures very often, because he is. I think he was was studying with Le Corbusier or something like this. I think he knew him, and he was even in his office or so. So he is part of the classical modern movement of concrete architecture. He was even inventing the new terms, the ways of concrete, waterproof concrete, and these things. So he is not this kind of, let's say, eco-romantic guy like Hundertwasser, who also I love very much in a certain way, but in this way, it's good not to be Hundertwasser, because he has this belief in, he trusts this modern optimism. Also, he trusts in a kind of technology, yeah? And at the same time, he loves this wilderness and this just things, letting things develop. And by this, he expresses something which I think is essential for future-oriented design approaches, is to give up control in a certain way, to create structures, to create designs that are strong enough to be not controlled. And this holds true for landscape architects as well as for architects. It doesn't matter. So there's so much control in our growing environment. In the parks, everything has to be like exactly how it was planned. And the same is for architects who still aim to make masterpieces that should stay like this was drawn by US designer, which is for me super strange. And there this strange habit comes from that architects, when the building is finished, they run to the photographer, that it makes the picture in the first week, because afterwards it's destroyed by somebody. It's a super strange habit. And a forester would never do that. He would all the photos of good landscape architecture works in the first years are super boring, and they just emerge over time. And my message also in teaching is very much that we cultivate this attitude in a way. And maybe here I can come back to you, Sandra, with a question. I'm very much interested how you translate this research, these experiments you do, these investigations, how you translate this into your teaching.
No, I do. I use a lot of this. Well, I also have. How do I translate? Well, I did. Well, okay. I'm new to Munich, so that's what I started to do is to always, when I do a studio as an example, I always start from. Maybe this may be very banal, but in the same time, it really changes the perspective. But I always start from a place that is where the nature is strong, even though it's a very different nature. Tiergarten is different from Prater, is different from Englische Garten. And so I have the students starting from there, from a place that is not understood as classic architecture in a way. And then the research starts, and then the vision or the approach changes, and the sensitivity also develops in a different way. There is different things that are more important, that become important. And as you said, also the aspect of time, that you can plan for the next 500 years or 5,000 years or even longer. And therefore you have the sense of responsibility is much higher, and the sense of what kind of resources I'm going to use, or it's a very different set of mind. And we need, as humans, I think, a different set of minds, because we just live maybe, if we're lucky, 80, maybe 90, maybe 100, maybe 60, I don't know. But these are the confines of our imagination in a way. And as planners, since we plan for a future, then we need to extend the perception of time. And I think to go inside a place that is really where they are growing, the elements that make this place, build this place, are growing, they're alive, and they change constantly. It really challenges this set of mind of the architect, and that's really helpful. I found that. And at the same time, I also use this Lichtluftscheiße research has been going on for quite a while, and we started it together with Silvan Linden, my partner, in Nuremberg at the academy with our students, and we called it Sonne, Scheiße, Kompost und Luft. It's always trying to sort of rewrite this the triad of the light, air, and sun. You know, the classic triad of architecture, Le Corbusier, and then taking in something that is dirty and rich and fertile, like compost or like shit. And then that's so I use both in design and research. I don't know, in the research I would guess it becomes more interdisciplinary, but then I give I try to combine always this, the aspect of that you mentioned, really important, of impermanence, of change, of transformation within architecture. And then you have to find words to name that. And they don't have to be words from architecture. They can be from the natural world. It can be rot, it can be decay, it can be, and then from then on start the research from a different perspective. And the students are certainly they have a high sensitivity for this. Right now, this moment, they are eager, they're hungry to hear these topics, to work in a different way. I would say that's my perception. And I love this, what you said about the I hate also the pictures when things are new and just done, and that's it. That's the architecture as it is, for the last forever. And that's how it's presented in the books of architecture. We see these perfect images,
yeah, absolutely,
pristine,
absolutely.
and nothing happens anymore. And instead, it's the moments when it starts to be news and grow and change, and old matter changes, and so that's I don't know, that becomes way more interesting.
Yeah, that means that architecture in this way is decoupled from metabolism completely. And I think your Lichtluft-Scheiße is so strong because it really challenges this paradigm of a hygienic, clean architecture that is finished, that is inert, that doesn't react. And I was today in the exhibition of our master's thesis here at TUM, which is great work, but 80% still, I would say, is object, and it would get worse when it would become dirty. Yeah? And we should try to make architecture that becomes better when it gets dirty. And we have I sometimes do it, not every year, every semester, but we also do architecture models with cardboard. But I don't tell the students beforehand, but they're small models, and then I force them to put them in a plate with salty water. And then the salty water is sucked up and it blooms out. Yeah, and everything is changing. And they have to make forecasts of how it might look in a week. And the funny thing for sure is it's all wrong. Yeah, it's always wrong, and you can't predict the future. I think this is very important to learn. We know that we have a huge challenge with climate crisis, but just the numbers of 0 point something, 1.5, 1.8, 2.5, whatever degrees, does not say anything how exactly the future will be. We don't know. It's super naive. And we have, for example, in landscape architecture, we have this research about climate change resisting trees. What the fuck is that? No one knows what comes. So we can only guess, yeah, but no one can promise that these trees might resist what is coming. We don't know. We just need to believe in the future. Yeah, that's very important.
Do you think you can not plan at all?
No, my God, no, that is totally wrong. No, that would be a shame. I mean, then I should give up teaching. This is exactly the opposite. But we need to design timelines, for example. Then the result. For sure, I think design becomes much more important than in this way of thinking than in our current way of thinking. I just challenge this solely object-related design. We for sure need product design, so to say, object design, but even more, because we need it not just as one thing that is done. So what really many of my students hate a bit, that they have to draw everything 10 times because they have to, with everything, to make a timeline. Yeah, so they have to draw it after completion, so-called completion, and then after 10, 50, 100 years, and so on, and 200 years. I had a great master thesis by Lena Bonengel, a landscape architect. She wanted to start to grow her own house, and I said to her, yeah, you can do that, and she did it. She started. But for sure, it will last longer than she lives. So she went to there's a machine in the internet, a website where you can calculate your probably day of death. Yeah, you hand in, you give in all your data. You should be sure what you do, yeah, if you smoke, if you don't smoke, if you do sports and whatever, yeah. And then if she was lucky, she will become 106 years old. And then she was designing until her death and at the same time beyond. This is just great. And this is, I mean, the thesis has 300 pages or something because she couldn't finish. Yeah? So there's even more need to design, to give Gestalt in German, yeah, to the things than if we just think in one moment. Yeah? So it's, I would say it's exactly the opposite in a way.
Yeah.
We don't hear you, Antonius.
Oh,
yeah.
Antonius?
So you'd say we should plan, like, for example, in timber construction, planning for weathering, planning for the retaking of nature, for nature taking back the space that we took from nature.
That's one option. Maybe Sandra, you want to answer?
Yeah, that would be interesting as a brief. Giving back, I mean, in a way, nature also is a great engineer. I mean, it plans constantly and it changes constantly and it makes mistakes and learns from the mistakes. It keeps changing. I mean, things always evolve and develop. And so maybe the mistake that we make is really that we don't think ourselves as part of it, and taking in this you know, self-correcting sort of systematic way of designing, or that we always perhaps within, yeah, the mistake of thinking within finished objects, that we should, because anyway, decay is going to happen, transformation is going to happen. But then if you start thinking in a more conscious way and taking in elements from the environment, or the elements that might fall in weathering, or I don't know, insects, mildew, however, you take it in, then it becomes really something that is alive and transforming. And all matter is, in a way, is also somehow alive in this way. And I think, yeah, the brief would be interesting to plan to give something back to the natural, but then in a way it's not. It's yeah, maybe within this conditions of the present, we need to think in this way. But I would say that in the future the question will be obsolete, because I hopefully will be part of the system of nature. We will understand our operations as part of it. Necessarily so, I would say. We have to, yeah.
But Antonius, the question was really good. So we discuss a lot this circular economy, and I think both terms are wrong, or don't hit the point. At first, I don't believe in circles. A circle is an exception, or you make a line, and how likely is it that you exactly meet that same point again in a system that is moving? Yeah, there's no chance. So the circle is an absolute exception. So, for example, the classical example of the aluminium can that is recycled to an aluminium can. How boring is that? We should, if we have an aluminium can today, which is bad, we should use the aluminium to do something better out of that in the future. We shouldn't repeat the same bullshit with the aluminium cans. Yeah, so this is very important to understand. And the second is circular economy. Yes, I love economy in a way, but we should, if we speak about circular, we should speak about circular design, because we have to draw these things. Yeah, and when we speak about this cycling of material and so on, we always end up with Excel tables. Also great stuff, Excel tables. I also laugh in a way, but it is a question of visualizing what is happening. Yeah, yes, this material could be disassembled in 95 years or whatever, and then please draw it. This is the important stuff. Yeah? This is what we can do as architects. We also can do Excel tables, but we should also draw the stuff. And I think here it becomes very, very clear how much these things that Sandra was presenting, which might not relate to architectural practice at the first moment, or you show shrubs and dirty water and stuff like this. But this is so much related to design and really in this German Gestalten term. I think this is very, very important to understand this point, that we should not leave too much of this to the engineers or also ecologists, which is great that they become designers as well in a way. But yeah, we need to be proactive and we need to reinvent new roles, which also is then new forms of work. I would say this classical office will date out, I think, in a certain way. There might be some, but I guess the majority will do something different in the nearer future.
Sandra, do you want to say something to that? Otherwise, I'd go into another little different point.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, that's
because I was just thinking about. So first of all, yes, I think what you said, Ferdinand, I feel this. I'd say, and it's interesting to see. To look at these topics, basically this topic of change, I'd say, and which is something that is constantly happening, which is something that we constantly deal with, and which also was, I'd say, the major topic of the architectural biennial. How will we live together? It basically is all about change. What is going to change? How are we going to deal with change? And you two, both as landscape architects who ended up in contributing to a pavilion that dealt with a very close take on this general idea of the biennial, contributed to something that contributed in a way that really looked forward. But looking at the other exhibitions at the biennial, how did you experience the German exhibition in comparison to other parts of the biennial?
Do you want to go first, Ferdinand?
No, please go. Please go.
Okay. I don't know. It's well, it's too much to talk about the entire exhibition. There were many different contributions. I was fascinated, maybe because in a way, I mean, the German pavilion was really inspiring in terms of, you know, this empty space, and then there is all this promise from this future that is all solved, and many of the contributions were very concrete, but at the same time, there were videos, there were interviews. I mean, they were all working within the fields and doing real things. I mean, Ferdinand and Ludwig especially. But at the same time, you have this moment of you felt like in a bubble. And then if you went to the Japanese pavilion, as an example, it was the complete opposite. I found it fascinating at the level of detailing. You know, taking apart a house, I think from the 50s, and then bringing it back to the pavilion, analyzing it, documenting it. It's really like it becomes raw matter. It becomes a resource, even though it's banal architecture. It's completely unimportant in a way, but everything becomes material to build something new. And they built the artifacts around the pavilion, inside the pavilion, with the material from the house itself. And they're all done with high skills, using the minimal amount of new material. They use mostly the old material from the house. And maybe they add just tiny little bits that they need to finish the structure. I don't know, they did some sort of trellis to protect the plants outside. They did some other thing, tools, they built tools out of the house. So that's really interesting in terms of what Ferdinand was talking about, this transformation and the level of precision and intelligence and the creativity in the design by reusing material that is there as a resource. And I found that quite, very inspiring too. That was one of the most impressive pavilions for me. But there were other interesting projects, of course, more planetary project, but they were drawings. In this case, it was really they were so concrete and hands-on.
Yeah. I mean, it's always difficult to make a kind of a judgment or an interpretation so general. Yeah, because it's so you get tired even if you're two days on the biennial, you can't get it all. For sure, the German pavilion is outstanding in a way, but it is also good to have this contrast. Yeah, so it's also next to the Japanese pavilion where with this hands-on practice with this use was done with using old material again and so on. These whole roofs, Japanese roofs, and so on. I honestly enjoyed the general presentation of the topic in the main pavilion. I think it was a well-balanced, well-curated work that mixed concrete architectural approaches and urban planning approaches with things like look like natural history exhibition in a way, architectural positions, artistic positions. That was I think a good take in a way. So we had much worse biennials, so to say, and yeah, I was happy to see Raumlabor winning the line for sure, not just because of patriotism, but also I think they deserved it after 25 years of really, really hard work on their topics, yeah. So I think it was, if you still have the chance, it's worth going and taking the time, 2 days, whatever, to stroll through the whole exhibition, definitely.
But how did you experience your contributions as landscape architects in especially your field of or your specific view of architecture in this context, especially in the context of general change that is happening at the moment with COVID-19, with many things that I would say force change and make change at the moment at the biennial itself.
Maybe I go.
You know what I mean?
So yeah. So at first you push me in the identity crisis because I never know how to introduce myself as an architect or as a landscape architect. I'm an architect by training, professor for landscape architecture, but I'm not allowed to name me landscape architects because the Chamber of Architects does not accept me as a landscape architect because I have not studied that. I am allowed to teach it, but I'm not allowed to say it's very, very funny. Also says a lot about how outdated this separation all about is. So I can't say how I feel as a landscape architect in this exhibition. What I can say is from my experience in these two disciplines is, sorry for the architects, but the landscape architecture has, in my eyes, the stronger concepts at the moment to answer the environmental crisis we are in. By having the broader horizon, by having a much deeper attitude to systemic thinking, and by having, is the only design discipline that has a long tradition in processual design in a way. By coming from gardening, that's also why we made this contribution to this newspaper that was published by the Pavilion Architects as Planetary Gardeners. That is quite key for me. The gardener for me is a hero in a way, not this kind of stupid gardener that uses chemicals and so on, but the hero of a gardener that is making a better place out of a desert in a way. This is the essence of a gardener. And if we want to survive with 9-10 billion people of the planet, we have to garden the planet. This is not about wild nature reserves so much. We might have some, but it is really about cultivating the surface, the whole surface in a way, not only for our benefit, but also for other species' benefit. And this is coming through now step by step, but architects have to learn still more than landscape architects. Yeah? Both have to adapt a lot, but and they have to learn from each other. But for sure, there is a bit of landscape architects might be a bit ahead. Sorry to say, Antonius.
No, I'm glad to hear that, especially from an architect, because I mean, we are in a constant position of change, I'd say. And, I'm still learning, so I still have a chance to take a different look at it, possibly.
Well, I think there is a lot of potential in integrating ecological processes within architecture or classic architecture, if you want, education, and that's something it's going to happen no matter what, in a way, also because of the tools for architects, because they're also changing. And I mean, you're going to be also programming probably, or you're going to, or you already do that, very likely so. And in a way, so it's, I don't know, this is something that is, it has an enormous potential. And yeah, as Ferdinand said, the division between the two disciplines, landscape architecture and architecture, is that should be erased completely. That's as a first step. That's maybe the most banal way of putting it. But I was just thinking while Ferdinand was talking that there are these beautiful maps done by these two artists. They're like one of the first eco artists from the 70s, 60s, Helen and Newton Harrison. And they always worked with projections, and they worked with scientists, and they worked also with planners. So they made these beautiful geographic maps. But then in 200 years, I don't know, they looked at Europe, they looked at the Tibetan plateau, and they never looked at political borders. They always looked at the geographical, more geographical borders, if you want, and not political. And then they started projecting it. So the Tibetan plateau, because of the climate crisis or the changes, of course, the projections are faulty by definition, because they're never really precise, and they're never really the reality. The reality is, as also Ferdinand mentioned, is different. But anyway, so the Tibetan plateau is like a brown sort of surface, because it's all burned and all the glaciers are melting away. And so therefore, or the Italian, I don't know, the Italian peninsula, or they call it also Peninsula Europe, I think, where all the waters are rising, and therefore you have more lagunas and all kind of different landscapes that are shaping very rapidly within our environment. And there, this push of the environment itself changing so much. And the projection is really interesting, because it helps to imagine the amount of work, the amount of planning, the amount of thinking intelligence you need to use to adapt to this fast changing environments. And I thought that's something where the disciplines are bound to collaborate, all kind of different disciplines. And so there is this, I don't know, this is something that, I don't know, the scale of the project really helps redefining a little bit the practice, also our own practice as designers, or as I thought, because of the so it's scary, threatening, but in the same time, it has I don't know, it shows the amount of intelligence needed for the adaptation.
And it's a super exciting time, or we had never witnessed more exciting times, I would say. Just the challenges, but also the tools that come up. It was hard to go through Corona, and it's not over, we know that. But we have learned so much. So we have a studio, for example, run with colleagues in Nehu, Shillong in India. Yeah, it's totally great. So they have just smartphones there, and they make 3D point clouds from the side, Our students make physical models with wire, use their smartphone, make a photogrammetry of this, and we merge the point clouds, and we are working in the same space. Looked impossible 2 years ago. Yeah, it's just amazing, and we are really also. You mentioned the digital tools, yeah, the programming. It was always a bit, hard to work with you. I'm trained in this old AutoCAD 10, you know, very old stuff, yeah, Photoshop 0 or whatever, yeah, which was really, really tough to learn and couldn't do anything, yeah. And now we are at the point where I have the feeling that the complexity or that the calculation power and also the artificial intelligence that is more and more embedded, even in things like Photoshop, we have these things now inside, are suddenly able to cope with the complexity of nature. And this is really enriching. So far, it was just a digital ruler, or in a way, you could measure in this direction. And now we are at the point where tools are showing up that help us to think better, to understand the environment better, to deal with the complexity of nature in a way we can't do it. And that's cool. That's really something we are about to explore. And it will explode in the next 10 years. I'm absolutely sure.
Then, let me ask you a final question. Possibly a fairly basic interview question, but what would you give the students, or what advice would you give the students from your perspective, and what you've taken from experiences from your field, but also in context with the Architectural Biennial of 2021?
Do you want to go, Ferdinand? Please
go, Sandra.
go ahead.
Exactly
No,
the same.
I don't know. It's two different questions, because the one relates to the biennial and the other one is. But no, you want to go? Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe I can speak from my own biography in a way. I was very lucky. Yeah, I was lucky that I stumbled over this option of research. Honestly, yeah. I'm as the majority of you know, I tried to grow architecture already as a student back in 2004 or 5, yeah, and I kind of failed because it didn't really work out very well the first tries, and then I visited a botanist, and he said, "Okay, that's great. Do you want to do a PhD about that?" I didn't know what that is at the time, but I said yes, yeah, and this was a privilege, because I had a scholarship, and for 3 years I was funded to really concentrate on gaining knowledge. And this is, it's a very old-dated statement, but this is a statement that goes in this humanistic way of studying. Yeah, but it's really a privilege to have the opportunity to invest time in gaining knowledge, in making experiences, and not just solving everyday struggle problems from an office. It is also always great to work in office, to have this experience, but we have to treat and we have to keep this as something really very powerful. This chance of being university people, no matter if professors or students or researchers, that we can explore things, and we also students need to force professors to think beyond just the classical framework of how we see the profession today, and understanding the studying as a training boot camp for creating new people for the office. That is by far too short, really. If we do that, we waste all your students' talents, I would say. We need more from you, because we don't know what is coming. So this is my message.
very strong. Thank you for that.
I can only agree with this. I think this is, I like the aspects of, I always enjoyed, or I think it's really important to think the discipline of architect or being an architect as a generalist. I also already said that at the beginning. I think that's to always a little bit be testing things and be a little bit of a amateurish or a dilettante in a way, and to never be afraid of that, to connect things also. And I think also the aspect that perhaps also connected to what also Ferdinand was talking about, the digital aspects that you, in a way, the new tools that you're going to work with, or that we're going to work with, they're going to make you more into a Baumeister in a way, to become more, to create really prototypes, to work on solutions that are really specific, and in a way combining engineering with Gestaltung and all kind of different things. And but I found both the levels of the digital level and the level of the experimental level of making prototypes are really fascinating and very important. And that's maybe something that I would go more into also in my own. Maybe I don't know. That's in our own practice. We go from different scales, and we work on many different kind of projects. But it's always each little assignment becomes a little bit of like an experiment, and we really liked this openness. And but yeah, I think in the future, I think the figure of the Baumeister is kind of fascinating in a digital way. You know, this is not just simply also building things, of course, both things, because it will be one thing. It will be simultaneously, practically, the act of designing and the act of building, and that's kind of and then with the level of what also Ferdinand mentioned, with the level of data that we can process, where the complexity is part of it. That's extraordinary, and that's going to go fast. Yeah, and we have to make it fast. Yeah, that's the other aspect. I don't know. In terms of the biennial, for me, it's just ecology in terms of a system of the world. You know, thinking within the system of the world. That's a topic, and that's the only topic we have. I would say. I'm sorry, not to be limiting. It's quite the opposite, to be empowering. This is the. It's a mission. Yeah.
Then, as part of the team of the architectural exhibition of the TUM, I want to say thank you, because I personally really enjoyed the lecture and the talk with you. I hope to see you in person someday. And hopefully this is gonna happen next year, this whole thing in a different context. And but until then, thank you, and a very good evening.
Thank you, Antonius, to bring us together here. This is great. You and the whole team. Yeah, great job. Also, for me, it was very inspiring to listen to you, Sandra, and to discuss. We'll continue.
Yeah, I really much hope so, and I'm going to be, of course, in Munich very much. So I'll be there. And I'm a big admirer of the Baubotanic. I've been following it for quite a few years, and yeah, I love. And I didn't quite understand what the AYA is and how you operate. But I'm fascinated, I must say. Also, the questions you asked and the exchange we had in emails and so on, I thought it's a great initiative. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you for having me.
Have a nice evening altogether.
All right.